Hello all, welcome to study 45 of the Solving Studies to Improve Chess Calculation series. As you are already guessing, this study comes from the current world champion Gukesh Dommaraju, the Indian world champion of chess. He produced this study in 2021 when he was only 15 years old. And again, this proves that if we start to solve studies, we can improve a lot our technique, our calculation, and we can really become very strong, like Lukesh is showing over here. I find this study very interesting. There's a story behind it. Jan Timman, which is a fervorous adept of studies, wrote this column on New in Chess number 6 2022, and I don't have the magazines anymore, but at that time I was a subscriber, and I clearly remember to see this one and got impressed because how young was Gukesh at that time. And Jan Timman, to celebrate his 70 years, he organized a tournament, study tournament, and one of the submitters was the impressive Gukesh Dommaraju with only 15 years old. I find this study very interesting. It's not so easy. It didn't receive an award. I will explain why with the solution. But let's first try to solve it and then we come back again. Before going to the countdown, you already know that you can watch the video with the guide so you can improve your practice. And if you are ready, the countdown will start, and then I see you again with the solution of this amazing study. And here we are, and again, let's show the first move right away. Rook a8 check, and white is winning. As we are going to see, I can say this study has two phases. One, that it's simple, and then we got into an end game where the rook dominates the bishop, and that's going to be very interesting because uh, it didn't got an award, and Jan Timman explains because there were a couple of too good also solutions that made the study a bit weaker. Nevertheless, I think this study is amazing to show how deep was the technique Gukesh had already with 15 years old. So let's go for the study and stay with me to see how cool it is to go along with this one. So at start, black has a rook and three minor pieces against one rook and just two minor pieces. Also, black bishop is attacking our rook, so basically you are forced to do something with the rook, and especially if you want to win. So this check, I think it's obvious. Of course, the king won't go to c7, giving away the rook, so it's basically forced also to go to e7. Now, we are not going to exchange, of course, we are a minor piece down, so we check again. And of course, the king can't go to f8 because otherwise we have two cool checkmates, one or with the bishop, so two cool checkmates to win the day. So the king needs to come back. And this is basically the first time where we need to think deeper. And so, if we wanted a draw, it would be easy. We would deliver another check, then and come back again, and with an easy repetition. Maybe for the common mortals like us, a draw would be enough in a over the board situation. But Gukesh also wanted to take it deeper, and so he was really finding the best move, and the best move is bishop f6. So white is sacrificing the bishop, and the idea we are going to see is pretty cool. So the knight takes the bishop, of course. The pawn takes, of course. Now two pawns are really dangerous, so the next move is also forced. And now white to play again, and we need to find the following move. Incredible, good move. Because what happened now? So now we are threatening checkmate. So we are still in the almost in the end of the first phase. So we are threatening checkmate. So if the king moves away, it will be checkmate. Our bishop is controlling the escape square. So it can't be done. So the remaining possible moves for black is to deliver a check. Well, this is a desperado one. We simply take the knight and we got the same threats. Of course, the king now can move away from checkmate, but we simply check it, and when it moves away, we are a rook up, so no story after this. And so, moving the bishop with check, we could deliver this kind of check, but the king moves to the side. So now we are threatening again checkmate. What can black do? Maybe remove the bishop, but then white can sacrifice the pawn with check, and either we take with the bishop, it's checkmate, or if I take with the rook, it's checkmate again. So this one doesn't work. And if the bishop goes to e5, well, we simply take the bishop, and then we are really winning. Now we are threatening to check again, and then winning the rook. So maybe the rook comes to e7. Yes, okay. But now we simply check the king. The king needs to come up. We attack the rook, and suddenly black realizes the rook is lost. So even if the king tries to protect the rook, it's just temporary, and then I win the rook. So basically, over here, it doesn't work. And maybe this was more or less the simple solution that us, while doing this, would have reached. And to be honest, it was here that I was stopped. Because I didn't saw the other that looked like not so common move, which is to sacrifice the rook. Well, kind of strange because this looks winning for white. but this is the continuation Gukesh gave. So let's pay attention to it. So when he submitted the study, he gave a lot of lines, lots of solutions, and this was his main defensive move. So from here, we are already seeing that Gukesh is trying always to get us to go to the best solution. That's maybe why he is so good. And remember that he delivered this study and it fails because it has more than one possibility, which also shows that Gukesh was not also using the engine to produce the study. So let's respect that and think a bit about it. And so, okay, he suggests the defense to sacrifice the rook, the king takes, and now, as you can see, the bishop is attacked. And now starts the second phase of the study. And of course, let's see what happens. If the bishop goes to the corner, well, it will be taken by the rook. If it goes to g7, it's a direct catch. And so over this d4, well, the rook simply delivers a check and then grabs the bishop. So the bishop starts to have few squares. The other corner also not possible. It's a direct catch, of course. If the bishop comes to b2, well, then white will maneuver the rook to catch the bishop. How? We bring it to a6. The idea is to deliver some checks. Let's see, for example, what happens if I play, for example, g4, then check. The king moves. We check it again. The king moves again. And now, suddenly, we are threatening to take the bishop. The bishop goes to one, whatever, square. And now, suddenly, we simply play bishop b7 and we have a mating net. And this is basically the idea and the masterclass that Gukesh starts to teach us. It's the rook dominating the bishop. And so here we see how a kid with 15 years old was able to think so deep in this kind of study. And so basically white from here is threatening to checkmate while at the same time trapping and dominating the bishop. Really amazing. So let's see the main line Gukesh gave. Well, he suggested us to play bishop c3, and here, well, he continues with rook d7. Jan Timman told on the New in Chess article that one of the reasons this didn't receive an award it's because there are other solutions, and Gukesh proposes this one, but Jan Timman also told that attacking directly the pawn works. So if the g pawn tries to advance, we simply take, and according to the table base, this is also a win. And so it makes it a bit weaker, but nevertheless, I prefer to go deeper until now with Gukesh idea and learn from it. I spent more or less a full day, if not more, a bit more, because I catch the study in the day after, really trying to understand this technique of the rook dominating the bishop while the rook and the white bishop are coordinating two threat mating nets. So really interesting. So we can learn a lot by studying these ones. And here the king moved to the side, and again Jan Timman proposed another solution, and I prefer the solution Jan Timman gave because it's simpler. It's to bring the king. So this check is to, of course, so we can take the bishop, then the king takes the rook. So we are not falling into that. And now we are going to prepare a mating net. How we can do it? We simply move the bishop. So our intention is to deliver a check on a6. Black can stop it. Maybe it can try to bring the knight to delay the checkmate. Now check, the king moves, check again. Well, we can see here what happens if the king goes back. We simply deliver a discover check and catch a piece. So not so interesting. If the king goes to the corner, then we simply use our king to approach. Of course, the bishop will try to bother the king, but the idea is to reach c8. And after we reach c8, we now need to change our bishop to the long diagonal so we can have the discover check again. So the knight will try to stop that, but it's not possible because even in this situation we will have the discover check. Let's say, for example, we play g4 because we don't want to be caught off guard. Well, simply the rook being uh, removed, it's checkmate unless you sacrifice the knight. So you are going to win this endgame anyway. So this was the solution Jan Timman showed that made the study a bit weaker because it had more than one solution. So, but let's move on back here over here. So after checking and the king goes to c8, of course, if the king goes to e8, then we simply attack the bishop, and after the bishop moves, we simply check. Only way to protect checkmate is by blocking it, and with the bishop we move the king away and we got the bishop. So anyway, here we are forced to go to c8, and then Jan Timman proposed the king d6 solution, which is easier, but Gukesh proposed to go with rook d5. And again, we need to study this one because this is kind of a new study. And what we learn with it is simply how to use the domination of the rook over the bishop and promote mating threats to win this one. Because otherwise, it's always dangerous. Let's see just the lines Gukesh showed us. So now it's a simple threat to check and take the bishop. So here, bishop b4 is the proposed by Gukesh. There is another line, bishop e1, but here again we check the king. Of course, the king has two possibilities, but going to d8, I showed this one already. We just bring the bishop, so the mate is unavoidable. Whatever you do, it will be checkmate. So the king needs to go to b8. Now we approach our king and we are building the mating net again. The king moves, of course, to the A file, but we are going to approach our king anyway, and we are going to see this team a lot. G4, we attack the bishop to win one tempo. The bishop moves, then we check, the king moves, and suddenly we are threatening checkmate again. Only way is to, so we are threatening over here in A8 checkmate, so only way is to bring the bishop, but of course now we check from the b file, the bishop is forced to come back, and then it's game over again. So as you see, lots of interesting lines over here. So let's go with the okay, over here the bishop moves to b4 instead of v1. Now it's white to play, and again Gukesh finds an interesting idea, attacks the bishop again. Notice how dominated the bishop is. The bishop has not many squares, so the proposed by Gukesh is to go to f8. Now notice that the bishop is running away with squares, so Gukesh proposes to go with b6. Other possibility over here that I saw is to go to a3, but now the rook attacks the bishop again, so forcing it to move. Notice that now either one of these it's going to be or pinned then taken or catch after the fork. So again it needs to come back to f8, so it's very similar. So here we go directly to f8. The rook comes to b6, so the idea is to start to move the king to the corner. Let's say, for example, now black starts to threaten to go with g pawn until queen. Okay, no problem. We now attack the bishop. Notice the bishop is starting to miss squares to either way. So again, we are double playing, either attacking the bishop, either building the mating net. The bishop goes to a3, of course. There is no other good square over here. If it goes to here, then we got the fork again. So a3 again. And now the king goes to e8. E8 just to avoid the king to come back. So we are closing the king down. And the idea will be, again, to check, then approach the king again to d7, and build that mating net while threatening to win the bishop. So here, the best move is to advance the pawn. Of course, if black is not paying attention, like playing f3, well, then white is going directly to the mating threat. Notice that we are attacking the bishop moves, check, the king moves, and discovers check, and we win the bishop. So over here, the best for the defense is to advance the pawn to g3. So we are even closer to the queen. But won't be enough. Now we attack the king, so we deliver another check, forcing the king to move to the b file. If it goes to b7, of course, it's going to be a discover check, so this is basically a forced move. And so now black to play, best is to advance the pawn again, or after the king d7, sorry, it's black to play. The best is to advance the pawn, of course, because if, for example, if it plays the king, well, we simply are going to approach our king and build a mating net, unstoppable one. So next move, it will be rook b6 checkmate. So the queen promotes, but then checkmate. So what matters is the checkmate, of course. So here the best for black is to go directly for the promotion, which make it a bit harder, but not that much. So now white is threatening checkmate again on a8. Well, basically the queen promotes, but neither the queen promoting, neither the bishop going to c5 will avoid the finishing style with a checkmate. Well, let's place the position that Gukesh gave for the study ending, and I hope you also have enjoyed this from the start. So basically, I tell that this study has two phases. One phase is to solve the study, and the other one is to improve our technique of domination with a rook and a bishop against a bishop and a knight. I hope you have enjoyed also. I hope you are respecting more the importance of improving calculation through solving studies, and see you in future ones. Bye bye.